Again, my name is Daniel Carter, and this is the story of how my world fell apart and how I built it back stronger than ever. It's a tale of betrayal, rage, and the kind of revenge that leaves scars. Being married to Lena was like walking a tightrope over a pit of fire. She was captivating, brilliant, and utterly unattainable in ways that made me crave her even more. But beneath the glamour and charm, there was a darkness I had chosen to ignore for far too long. For years, I gave everything to make our marriage work. But no matter how much I poured into the relationship, it was never enough for Lena. Her ambitions stretched beyond our modest life. Her gaze always fixed on the finer things: designer clothes, luxury vacations, and the attention of men who could give her those things without question. Lena was breathtaking. 5 feet 4 inches, golden blonde hair that shimmered in the sun, striking green eyes, and a smile that could disarm even the hardest heart. But that beauty masked a heart that, I'd come to learn, was colder than ice. On the surface, we looked like the perfect couple. I was a high school teacher, raising twin boys from my previous marriage. She was working her way through an MBA, supposedly chasing the career of her dreams. But Lena's ambitions weren't about hard work or success. They were about using people, bending them to her will, and taking what she wanted, consequences be damned. The first cracks appeared when Lena began to pull away from me. Our conversations grew colder, her laughter reserved for phone calls she thought I couldn't hear. One Friday night, she stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her little black dress and applying a layer of lipstick that made her already full lips look like a temptation carved out of sin. "Heading out?" I asked from the doorway, my tone casual, but my insides twisted with suspicion. She didn't even turn around. "Just meeting some friends." "Friends, huh?" My voice was sharper now. "You mean the guy you were whispering to on the phone this morning?" Lena's hand paused mid-application. "Don't be ridiculous, Daniel. I've told you before, there's no point in being jealous. You know we can't keep doing this." "Jealous?" I scoffed. "I stopped being jealous the moment you decided I wasn't good enough. What I feel now is rage, Lena. Pure, blinding rage. You've been lying to me for months, years even. And for what? To humiliate me?" She finally turned to face me, her green eyes narrowing. "I don't have time for your tantrums. You knew this wasn't going to last. I need more than you can offer me, Daniel. I deserve more." Her words were like a slap, but the fire inside me only grew. "You mean you deserve someone to fund your endless shopping sprees and dinners at five-star restaurants?" I shot back. "You deserve a man who'll look the other way while you destroy everything you touch." Lena shrugged, unfazed by my anger. "Call it whatever you like. I'm done pretending to be something I'm not." As she turned to leave, the sound of a car horn echoed from the street. "That must be Max," she said with a smug grin. "Try not to wait up, darling." That night, as Lena walked out of my life, or so she thought, I sat in the dimly lit kitchen, staring at the table where we had once shared dreams of a future. But there would be no more dreams. Only plans. Calculated, ruthless plans to take back everything she had stolen from me. Lena thought she could walk away unscathed, leaving me to clean up the mess she'd made. But she was wrong. I wasn't the same man who had once idolized her, who had turned a blind eye to her flaws. I was a man scorned, and the only thing I wanted now was to make her feel every ounce of pain she had inflicted on me. I couldn't sleep that night. The image of Lena walking out the door, her smug grin still etched in my mind, haunted me. Her casual dismissal of me, of us, was like a poison I couldn't purge. But I wasn't going to wallow. Instead, I began to dig. Lena was careless in her deceit, confident I was too trusting or too naive to uncover the truth. She left her phone unlocked while she showered, and I took the opportunity to search through it. What I found confirmed my worst suspicions, and went even deeper than I'd imagined. There were text messages, photos, and explicit exchanges between her and a man named Max, her supposed friend. But there were others, too, names I didn't recognize, men who had clearly been part of her life in ways I hadn't even guessed. The most damning text read, "Daniel doesn't matter. He's just a safety net. You're the one I want, Max. Soon, we'll be free of him completely." Rage burned through me like wildfire. Lena had used me as her stepping stone, a means to an end, but her arrogance would be her downfall. Over the next few days, I channeled my anger into preparation. I contacted a divorce attorney and shared everything I had uncovered. The texts, the photos, even a recording of a conversation Lena had with one of her lovers, where she admitted that our marriage had been nothing more than a ploy for her to secure her residency and financial stability. "Good work, Daniel," my lawyer Amelia said, flipping through the evidence with a satisfied nod. "We'll file for divorce, citing adultery and fraud. But be prepared. This could get messy." "That's fine," I replied, my voice steady. "Messy is exactly what I want." Amelia looked at me curiously. "You have something else in mind, don't you?" I leaned back in my chair, a cold smile spreading across my face. "Oh, I'm just getting started." Lena returned home a few nights later, sauntering into the house as if nothing had happened. I was waiting for her in the living room, her phone resting on the table in front of me. "What are you doing up?" she asked, her tone casual as she slipped off her heels. "We need to talk," I said, my voice low and controlled. She frowned. "Can it wait? I'm tired." "No, Lena," I said firmly. "It can't." I picked up her phone and scrolled through the messages until I found the one I'd been reading over and over in my head. I tossed the phone onto the couch beside her. "What's this?" I asked, my voice dripping with disdain. Lena glanced at the screen, her expression betraying a flicker of surprise before she masked it with indifference. "So, you've been snooping. That's a bad look, Daniel." I laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "And screwing half the city isn't? Don't even try to gaslight me, Lena. I know everything." She crossed her arms, leaning back against the couch. "Fine, you caught me. So, what now? Are you going to throw a tantrum, pack my bags, and kick me out? Go ahead. It's not like I need you anymore." Her brazen arrogance only fueled my resolve. "You think you've won, don't you?" I said, leaning closer. "You think you can walk away from this unscathed? But you're wrong, Lena. Dead wrong." The next morning, I set the wheels in motion. The first step was a visit to Immigration Services, where I met with a case officer named Victoria Lane. Victoria was sharp, professional, and entirely uninterested in Lena's excuses. "This kind of fraud is taken very seriously," Victoria assured me after reviewing the evidence I provided. "We'll open an investigation immediately." Knowing Lena's residency status was now under scrutiny was satisfying, but it wasn't enough. I needed to hit her where it hurt most: her image, her reputation, and her wallet. I shared the evidence of her affair with her employer, Max's boss, at the investment firm where they both worked. The company's strict morals clause meant immediate disciplinary action, and within days, Lena and Max were called into a meeting to explain themselves. The fallout was swift. Max was demoted. His fiancée left him after receiving an anonymous package containing photos and messages detailing his infidelity, and Lena was given notice that her position was under review. But the piece de resistance was still to come. A week later, I served Lena with divorce papers. I did it in the most public way possible, at a brunch she had organized with her closest friends. As she sat laughing and sipping mimosas, a process server walked into the restaurant and handed her the documents. The color drained from her face as she flipped through the papers, her friends looking on in confusion, and then shock as the truth became clear. "You bastard," she hissed when she returned home that evening. I smiled calmly. "No, Lena, I'm just finally standing up for myself. And trust me, this is only the beginning." As the weeks turned into months, I rebuilt my life piece by piece. My boys, who had always been my priority, became my greatest source of strength. I poured my energy into them, finding solace in their laughter and resilience. And then there was Victoria. The more time we spent together, the more I found myself drawn to her. She was everything Lena wasn't: kind, grounded, and genuine. Our connection deepened, and before long, I realized I was beginning to feel something I hadn't felt in years: hope. Meanwhile, Lena's life unraveled. With her career in jeopardy, her social circle abandoning her, and her residency status under investigation, she was left with little more than the wreckage of her once glamorous life. She tried to fight back, spreading rumors and attempting to manipulate mutual friends, but the truth was undeniable. Her lies had caught up with her, and there was no escaping the consequences. One evening, she showed up at my door, her eyes red from crying. "Daniel," she said, her voice trembling. "I made mistakes, but I don't deserve this. Please help me." I stared at her for a long moment, memories of her betrayal flashing through my mind. Finally, I said, "You're right. You don't deserve this. You deserve worse." I closed the door, leaving her to face the consequences of her actions alone. For Lena, life became a series of closed doors and harsh realities. Her once thriving social life had dwindled to nothing but whispers of judgment. She was ostracized by her former friends, who either pitied or condemned her. The prestigious job she flaunted was gone, terminated after the company's investigation into her unprofessional conduct with Max. Even Max, the man she had chosen over her husband, was no longer in the picture. His fiancée had thrown him out, and he blamed Lena for the chaos in his life. Without him, without her job, and without Daniel's support, Lena was left to fend for herself. But Lena wasn't ready to let go entirely. She still believed she could manipulate her way back into Daniel's life. One stormy evening, Lena showed up at Daniel's door, drenched from the rain, her once pristine appearance now a shadow of her former self. She looked smaller, her confidence replaced with desperation. "Daniel, I need to talk to you," she said, her voice barely audible. Daniel didn't open the door fully, keeping a firm grip on the frame. "What do you want, Lena?" "I need your help," she said, her voice trembling. "I made mistakes, I know that, but everything's falling apart. My job, my residency, I don't know where to turn." Daniel's face remained stoic. "And why would you think I'd help you?" "Because you're not like me," Lena said, tears streaming down her face. "You're kind, decent. You always were. I don't deserve it, but I'm begging you." For a moment, Daniel felt a pang of something. Pity, perhaps, or maybe just the weight of seeing someone who had once been so invincible brought low. But then he remembered everything she had done, the lies, the humiliation, the cruelty. "You're right, Lena," he said. "I'm not like you. And that's exactly why I'm not letting you back into my life." With that, he closed the door, her sobs muffled by the sound of rain against the windows. Daniel's life, by contrast, was flourishing. His sons thrived under his care, their laughter filling the house with warmth he hadn't felt in years. His connection with Victoria deepened, transforming from friendship into something more profound. Victoria had a way of grounding him, helping him navigate the emotions Lena's betrayal had left behind. They spent hours talking, sharing stories of their pasts, and envisioning futures where trust and love were no longer elusive. One evening, as they sat on Daniel's porch watching the sunset, Victoria turned to him with a soft smile. "You know, I never thought I'd find someone like you," she said. Daniel chuckled. "You mean a guy with baggage the size of a freight train?" "No," she said, taking his hand. "I mean someone who's willing to let go of the past and still believe in the good." For the first time in years, Daniel felt hope blooming in his chest. Lena wasn't finished, though. When her pleas for reconciliation failed, she turned to anger and spite. She tried to smear Daniel's reputation, reaching out to mutual friends with fabricated stories of his supposed emotional abuse and neglect. But Daniel was prepared. He had built a network of trust with those who mattered most, and Lena's lies fell on deaf ears. In fact, her attempts to deflect responsibility only further alienated her from the people she sought to win over. The final blow came when immigration services concluded their investigation. Lena's fraudulent marriage was exposed, and her residency status was revoked. She was given 30 days to leave the country. The day Lena left, Daniel received an envelope in the mail. Inside was a letter from her, scrawled in hurried handwriting. "Daniel, I know I've hurt you more than I can ever apologize for. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that, in my own way, I did care for you. I just didn't know how to love you the way you deserved. Maybe one day, I'll find the strength to become a better person. Maybe not, but I hope you find happiness, because you're the only one who truly deserves it. Lena." Daniel read the letter once, folded it neatly, and placed it in a drawer he rarely opened. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was closure. Months turned into a year, and Daniel's life was unrecognizable from the storm he had endured. His relationship with Victoria blossomed into a love that felt honest and real, built on mutual respect and understanding. On a crisp autumn evening, Daniel proposed to Victoria in the same spot where they had shared their first deep conversation. She said yes, tears in her eyes, and their wedding was a quiet celebration of love and resilience, attended by close friends and family. Daniel's son stood proudly by his side, and for the first time in years, he felt the peace he had been searching for. One evening, as Daniel sat on the porch of his new home with Victoria by his side, he reflected on everything that had led him here. Lena's betrayal had been the darkest chapter of his life, but it had also been the catalyst for change. "I never thought I'd say this," Daniel said, his voice thoughtful. "But in a way, I'm grateful for everything that happened. It brought me here, to this moment." Victoria smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "It's funny how life works, isn't it? Sometimes, the worst things can lead to the best outcomes." Daniel nodded, his heart full. He had been broken, but he had rebuilt himself stronger. And in the end, he had found not just love, but something even more precious, peace. It had been several months since Lena was forced to leave the country. Daniel's life had settled into a comfortable rhythm, one he never thought he'd experience after the emotional turmoil he'd endured. Each day brought more clarity, and the darkness that had once clouded his mind began to fade into something lighter, something more hopeful. His relationship with his sons had flourished, and they were growing into well-adjusted young men, resilient and strong, just like their father. Daniel felt an immense sense of pride in the way they had adapted to their new lives, the love and care he had invested into them paying off in ways he hadn't anticipated. They were a family again, bonded by a shared history and a deep connection that was now free from the toxic presence of Lena. As for his relationship with Victoria, it had blossomed into something extraordinary. What started as a business-like connection with immigration services turned into a partnership built on mutual respect, understanding, and a kind of love Daniel never thought he'd find after the wreckage of his previous marriage. Their bond was deep, and every day he spent with her felt like a new beginning. They often talked about their future, about dreams they hadn't dared to dream before. Their plans were simple, yet filled with a sense of peace. A life built on authenticity, honesty, and the freedom to love without conditions. But life, as it always does, had a way of throwing curveballs, even in the midst of happiness. One afternoon, Daniel received a call from his lawyer, who informed him that Lena had returned to the country under a new identity. Apparently, Lena had managed to manipulate her way into obtaining a false passport and had returned to try and rebuild her life once again. The news shook Daniel, but only briefly. He had anticipated that Lena's insatiable need for control would eventually bring her back. However, this time he was no longer the man who would allow her back into his life. He had moved on stronger, more resolute than before, and he wasn't going to let her wreck his life a second time. Daniel's first instinct was to seek legal recourse, to ensure that Lena's return would not cause any further disruption to his and his son's lives. But his lawyer, Amelia, advised against it, suggesting that he simply stay the course. "You have no reason to fear her anymore," she said. "Focus on your future, Daniel. Let her fight her own battles." Daniel took her advice, choosing to confront this new challenge by continuing to live his life with integrity and strength. He refused to allow Lena to disrupt the peace he had worked so hard to build. Despite Daniel's efforts to move on, Lena wasn't going to let go that easily. One day, as Daniel and Victoria enjoyed a quiet evening at home, the doorbell rang. It was unexpected. No one ever visited unannounced. Daniel opened the door, and there she was. Lena. Her hair was shorter now, but her eyes, the same sharp, calculating green, still held that familiar glint of manipulative cunning. "Daniel," she began, her voice shaky but laced with arrogance. "I know you think I'm done, but I'm not. I made mistakes, but I can change. I can be who you need me to be. I've learned from my mistakes." Daniel looked at her, with a mixture of disbelief and contempt. You think I'm going to fall for this again? After everything? After all you've put me through? His voice was steady, but there was an edge of finality to it. Lena stepped forward, her eyes desperate. I never wanted it to end like this. I just wanted to matter, to have the life I've always dreamed of. And you were always so easy to manipulate. But I'm different now, Daniel. I swear, I can change. Daniel's heart hardened as he stared at her. He wasn't the naive man he had been when they first met. The damage she had caused couldn't be erased with words. You don't get it, do you? Daniel said, his voice low but firm. I don't care who you've become. I don't want to fix this. It's over. You can't manipulate me anymore. You never loved me, and I won't pretend that you did. Lena stood there, her eyes wide with disbelief, before she finally turned and walked away. It wasn't the grand confrontation he'd once imagined. No dramatic final argument. Just the cold realization that she was no longer a part of his life. And for the first time in years, Daniel felt free. In the months that followed, Daniel focused entirely on his new life. His bond with Victoria deepened, and together they started making plans for their future. They talked about moving to a quieter town where they could focus on building a peaceful life, away from the chaos that had once defined Daniel's past. He also took his sons on a trip, just the three of them, to a place they had always dreamed of visiting, a small coastal town where they could fish, camp, and enjoy each other's company without distractions. The trip was a turning point, a reminder that family was everything, and everything Daniel had gone through had been worth it to create a life that was full of love, trust, and authenticity. At night, when the fire was burning low and the sound of the ocean filled the air, Daniel looked at his sons with pride. They had grown into remarkable young men, stronger than he ever imagined they would be. They had weathered the storm of their mother's absence, and now they were flourishing. You guys are everything to me, Daniel said one evening as they sat around the fire. You've made me a better man, and no matter what happens, I'll always be here for you. The following year, Daniel married Victoria in a small, intimate ceremony. His son stood by his side, their pride evident. It was a wedding that felt less like a beginning and more like a confirmation of everything he had built in the years since Lena had left. As they exchanged vows, Daniel realized that he had finally found the peace he had longed for. His past, painful as it was, had shaped him into the man he had become. And now, with Victoria by his side and his sons as the center of his world, he had everything he needed to move forward. Lena was a distant memory now, a shadow of the past that had no place in his present or future. Her attempts to regain control over him had failed, and in the end, it was Daniel who emerged victorious, not in vengeance, but in peace.